Yeah, hi, my name is Nick Graveley, and as Daniela says, for the last 20 or so years, I've been offering design sculpture services to the automotive industry, primarily the motorcycle industry. And yeah, over the last couple of years, really, I've also started teaching gravity sketch as well. And yeah, so basically, this is kind of what my job has looked like for the last 20 years, modeling stuff in clay. I've been able to work with some fantastically creative people, and yeah, never really seemed like a job, to be honest. And yeah, I've had a huge amount of fun. But I mean, the reason why we do these clay models really is because the automotive industry has to spend quite a lot of money developing these vehicles, and for them to have a kind of a commercial failure is a very expensive thing, and so they want to make sure that they can really make sure that these things look exactly the way they want before they industrialize them and put them out into the marketplace. So why clay? Well, the thing is, if you model something and it's a flop, it costs a lot of money, and it hasn't really changed at all over the last 90 years. So it was kind of invented in GM in the 30s, and it hasn't really changed a huge amount. It's still basically an ideas guy and a design sculptor like me working together to find the ultimate shape. And yeah, so there's this kind of back and forth that happens, where the designer will express himself through knife lines and tape lines, as Matt Bentley from Zero Motorcycles is doing here in this image. And yeah, and so we'll really do a lot of problem solving together to figure out exactly what needs to be done and how to do it. And it's really great for the designer because he can actually work with a craftsman such as myself in order to achieve that. There are some downfalls, of course, that it's kind of a messy process. It's kind of labor intensive, also, which means it's expensive, and also, whilst the rest of the industry's kind of become digital, so sketching has become digital with Photoshop, and engineering has become digital. There's really clay modeling as kind of this is become this sort of indulgent, not so much indulgent, but this very old school process which kind of exists on its own. And yeah, so it's not really a surprise that the automotive industry has been trying to push digital processes into this kind of aesthetic form finding area. So now, what has happened really is that so we've gone from this really amazing way of a designer and a sculptor working together to find form, to actually two people sitting next to a monitor, sitting next to one another and talking, and trying to create a three-dimensional object on a two-dimensional screen with only a single perspective at any one time. Only one person being able to make input. And so it's really kind of for me, it's a backward step in that communication in that collaboration. There have, of course, been benefits like being able to import the latest engineering package at any one time, or exporting the latest surfaces to the engineering team. And yeah, those are great advantages of digital, but I feel that the trade-off has been really to sacrifice every single benefit that has existed in clay modeling up until now. And so, and potentially the worst part about it is no longer being able to leverage the skills of those clay modelers who have spent tens of thousands of hours building real things in the real world. Really understand, learning about surfaces, learning how one thing changes everything around it, how those forms work, how the each surface proportion of that against the next area, and then each patch works in concert to create the entire vehicle, and that removal of that skill has been to the great detriment of the automotive industry, in my opinion, because when they hit the button and they mill out what was actually what they've seen on the screen, invariably it's a tremendous surprise to everyone. And then they have to go back into digital, change some of the stuff, and then they remill it out, and they chuck a load more clay that's milled off on the floor, and they just chuck that into the bin. And it's this kind of like going around the houses trying to circle in on the final form. And it's not very efficient, but it does plug in well to or better to the digital processes. So I've always been very cognizant of this kind of distance between physical modeling and digital modeling. And actually, it was when I went to California to go and work on these two motorcycles, the Zero SRF and the SRS, that I was fortunate that because they don't have any legacy processes, I was actually able to institute some solutions that would kind of reduce this distance that's always been there. It wasn't just an amazing project because my family and I went off to go and spend the summer in 2017 in California, living in a beautiful little beach house, which was fantastic. But basically, a couple of technological leaps were made. And I'm not sure I was aware of it really at the time, but now in retrospect, they really were technological leaps. The first one was to actually institute the use of like a handheld scanner like this one. This one's a Peel 2 from Peel 3D, and I got to say thank you very much to Francois from Peel 3D for his continued support of me. I use this in my process all the time whenever I'm doing clay models now, because it means what I can do is we can model something and we can scan really quickly in like 10-15 minutes, take that, snap it to some known coordinates in over the engineering package, and really understand where our clay surfaces are relative to the engineering surfaces. And also we can output those surfaces to engineering or anyone who wants to see them. And it was the second that brings me on to the second leap, which was to actually be able to put on a VR headset for the first time. And the digital modeler there at Zero, Alan Valencia, he actually took one of these scans and he dropped it over the latest package, and he cut my scan up into the different components and added texture and color. And suddenly I could see for the very first time in VR, rendered in VRED, actually what the clay I'd been working on really, really looked like with that color breakup. Typically, the only way we would ever be able to see color breakup was to do something like this. So we have the clay model, and we use this stretchy film called Dynoc, and we stretch it over the surface, and then you see kind of a little bit better what it looks like with the correct color breakup. But really, this is not, if you see something and say, no, I want to change it, you have to take the Dynoc off to make the change. Well, in Gravity Sketch and VR modeling, we can actually just update. We can work on it, in real time. So that's pretty amazing. So the seeing in VR was a really pivotal moment for me, and that was back in 2017. Gravity Sketch instituted Sub D in 2019, I believe, and then in 2020, that is when the Quest 2 was launched by Oculus. So I bought that as soon as that came out, and it's been a real life changer for me, to be absolutely honest. I just kind of bought it to see what was possible, see whether it could plug into the process, and what could be done with it. And I didn't realize at the time, but it would basically solve a massive pain point that I was having, which was because my young family was now getting to the school age and couldn't travel around the world with me anymore. They were having to stay at home, but I had to balance my need to kind of go out and earn money with my desire to be at home with my family. And so suddenly with VR, I actually no longer have to travel anymore. And I know this is a thing that many freelance clay modelers have to contend with, is this kind of balancing act of home life and working. And this has been a huge life change for me. And I just feel that I'm so lucky. Every day I can do my work. I can go mountain biking with my dog. I can see my family. I can have dinner with my family every night. Just incredible. Just feel so lucky. And on top of that, the reason is because this is how now we communicate. So this is very, very much like a clay modeling process. So I never went through digital, like flat monitor digital modeling. It was never an attractive proposition for me because I'm a three-dimensional creative. To try and make me create in a two-dimensional environment, it's a backward step for me. So, but this is kind of how it is. So you see my buddy here, Fabian, and I working on the Light Fighter race bike, and he's kind of pulling in lines here. And so, now what was a knife line and tape lines on a clay model has now become, ink lines and stroke lines. So we communicate in this way, and we still feel the presence of the model in front of us. We still feel the presence of each other. We don't have to. We're not beholden to putting a tape on an existing surface. Now, Fabienne or I, we can just make lines in 3 dimensions. The sort of air tapes that if you've ever worked on a clay model, you'll be familiar with putting a blob of clay on a corner and stretching a tape across it. And so this is no longer an issue anymore. And this is the moment I really wanted to play you a video, which is an excerpt from the Fate Makers podcast, which is a Frank Stephenson podcast where he's interviewing Achim Anscheid, who's the design director of Bugatti. And believe me, Achim is a real devotee to VR. He understands from clay. He understands all the drawbacks of clay, but unfortunately now we had a bit of a technical issue that we couldn't get the sound to be heard. So, probably if you're watching this in later edit, we'll drop the video in right here.
If you think about, measuring plates, measuring arms,
space,
clay ovens, and now having to protect from the smells,
health and safety.
Then five clay modelers around the car goes ching ching ching.
Absolutely, yeah.
Building up the frame for a 2-ton clay model, has to be rock solid, and then everything on top of that, and then the clay, and then milling that, and then the in and out and back and forth. It takes a long time and it costs a lot of money. And by the time I have a somewhat, in the classic process, I would say to have a somewhat reliable surface on a clay model or something that you like, you probably have spent already 400,000 to 500,000 euro. So for a long time, I didn't have much budget, pretty much zero budget in the design studio. And that brought us into working much heavier in VR. It is a disadvantage now to actually do it the conservative way with a classic clay model. Now, I can be quite a bit faster. I can also do my work on a smaller budget or use budget than for something else in my process. And I don't have the feeling I'm losing quality because the VR image by now, and this only happened in the last 3 to 4 years now, is so good that you really have the feeling you are looking at a real car. It's like a real car. It's really not much off. And then when we are somewhat satisfied, then we push the button and we do a hard model immediately, transparent, and we have it sitting there. But then it's not a big surprise actually from the system to come there, because you know how it was still some 10 years ago. You were looking at a CAD screen, but what you saw then in the yard was different. All of a sudden the sunlight hits this thing and looks different, and you go around it in 3/4 view and things are not the same way as you saw it on the CAD system. In this process, now clay modelers in a way translated became VR modelers. You still need experts in that field. Maybe the next step there that you can actually do it in real time.
Or in real time, that's with gravity.
Fully shaded, everything, and you're just pulling the lines right there, and the surface is immediately adjusting to that now.
A couple of things he says is, it feels like a real car. It feels like it's a disadvantage to work in clay now in a classic clay modeling process. And also that the milling out clay models that were from a two-dimensional CAD process, it was always a surprise when you had to look at them in full size 3-dimensional, and so these were problems that he's faced and has solved with VR, and now he can work much faster than he ever could before. And so this was the video, and so this was the where he was surprised by what's milled out. So this is kind of what it looks like when you mill out a full size clay model. it feels like a real car. It really, really feels like the presence. I mean, this kind of might look like a joke image or something, but it really, really feels like the thing is right there in front of you. And so he's experienced the speed gains, and they did this the Devo in 6 months. They did the Mistral in 9 months, and saved a huge amount of time, huge amount of money. I think he talks about like savings of from a clay model, he would be 400,000 to 500,000 euros to build a clay model, and these are like less than half that cost. And I presume because Bugatti is a very, very tight package, they kind of experience the same benefits that I feel of experience with motorcycles, because motorcycles are a very tightly packaged engineering, and you've got the ergonomics of the rider as well. And so this is to be able to integrate all those engineering and ergonomic issues, and they'll have aerodynamic issues, of course, as well. It's really such a powerful thing. He talks about also that clay modeling had experts, and in VR modeling, you also need experts. And so, what is an expert? So, you can see here a pencil. It depends who's holding the pencil, depending on what comes out. You can give a lump of clay to a 3-year-old child, 5-year-old child, whatever, and they'll make something with it. But you give that same lump of child to someone who understands form and how to use it in a precise way, and they can actually create tremendously precise output. And the same goes for VR modeling. So this is my daughter and I. Since I bought the Quest Pro, which I may or may not keep because it's kind of uncomfortable, to be quite honest. But since we now have 2 headsets, my daughter, she can play in Gravity Sketch, and she does some stuff there, some quite basic stuff in Gravity Sketch. But when I'm working in Gravity Sketch, I can make really, really beautifully precise surfaces there, and use them to actually output into the real world. So we can go from a sketch, and we pull the line work in around that sketch. We can do a lot of the design editing just with the line work, because we can infer the surfaces that exist between those surface breaks, skin it up with surfaces, and then go straight into a real life motorcycle right there. So there was no clay process in this, although I do advocate, if there is a budget, that definitely we should mill out a clay and check it and sit on it and all these kind of things. So so the thing is that I'm very optimistic about VR. Like, I understand that there is some resistance from the industry. Some people see it as just a toy. I don't see it that way, but the problem is trying to convince them of that. And there are certain people who are able to be convinced of that, and there are certain people who are very, very against it. And I, from what I hear, some of the larger OEMs really are not ever going to embrace it anytime soon. And that's okay. They will eventually. They'll have to, because the smaller companies that are able to operate a little bit more, change direction a little bit more quickly, use innovative technologies in their processes. These are the guys that are going to make it really, really penetrate the industry. So I'm optimistic about it becoming a question of when, not if. And we're really, really at the ground floor of this right now. This is, I've only been using it for 2 years, and already it's basically all but replaced most of the clay modeling work I do, like 90% of the form finding clay modeling. And watching Konstantina's presentation, Konstantina from Kadim, her presentation yesterday about how she can create 3-dimensional meshes that we could then bring into Gravity Sketch. That's really exciting. I've been talking to another company about how we might be able to take these this line work, these kind of line work, and then use AI to actually auto complete the surfaces, because really, when I'm doing the surfaces for this, I understand how to build the topology. It really feels like an algorithmic just process of just skinning it up, and it's really a fast thing. This is 100% something that could be done by AI. So if anyone's working on something like that and they would like to talk about that, I would really love to talk to you about that too. So where we're at now. So in order to make this happen, my goal really is to try and create a movement in my industry. So, and I don't think it's really coming too much from the industry side. I think what needs to happen is to train up some of these clay modelers who actually recognize that their career is not what it once was. Now, they're having to spend all their time milling up milling up milled clay models, and there's no satisfaction, I don't think, in that. It's not a creative process. It's just a process. It's just cleaning up clay models, putting Dynoc on. It's not terribly interesting. And for people who actually love the creative process, the creative collaboration, which I love, this is not really a good enough thing. So some of these guys, like these guys, for instance, these are just some of my students, are picking up Gravity Sketch, and Gravity Sketch have been amazing in supporting me with this by sending headsets to some of these guys. So thank you, Gravity Sketch, for your not just creating just the most incredible tool, but actually supporting me in my efforts to create this movement. So these guys are looking forward to a revitalization of their careers, and I'm really I love the work that I do. But it's really gratifying for me as I kind of get older to try and look for a bigger purpose, try to make some difference in people's lives, and kind of pay forward some of the amazing luck and joy that I've had up until now. So I guess just real quickly, I'll just sum up very, very quickly some of the benefits here. So, like for clay modelers, there's no longer the need to travel. You can work from anywhere. You don't any longer have to do like boring work, like just cleaning up clay models. You can actually get back in and do creative collaboration. For designers, you now are able to get back into this once again also into this kind of collaboration, but you're able to leverage the skills that the craftsmen had, the craftsmen that you always relied on when they were clay modeling, and have now been basically removed from the process, and that moved to flat monitor, alias concept modeling and such like that. Now you can leverage those skills once again. You've got a seamless input and output to engineering, so you can be part of those problem solving, get the engineers in, you can stick your head inside the model, look really, okay, brackets and such like, or hey, here's a tube, we need more clearance for this. And you can really be part of that conversation in a really kind of tangible way, because ultimately we're all working together to make products. We're all swimming in the same direction, and so how we can help the people downstream is also majorly beneficial. And I think engineering, you probably will see massive benefits of this too, because you're able to get great surfaces out and also feedback information. So it kind of tightens up the loop between design or aesthetic design and engineering. And then last of all, it's a benefit for studios because you're not having to mill out every couple of days. You're not milling out, loading up with expensive clay, milling off that clay, picking it up and chucking it in the bin. So there's less clays. Suddenly you can access global talent. Anybody who with an internet connection and a VR headset and the skills can work on your projects. So this it's just it's almost difficult for me to sell this. Like I was down in the EICMA motorcycle show at the beginning of this week talking to people about this, and it seems just too good to be true, but it really, really just it is this good. And so I'm really hopeful that with these guys learning Gravity Sketch and more guys learning Gravity Sketch, that we're going to be able to show industry, hey, there's a resource here. Now you can start to use it. I think together we can all kind of make a movement and make this happen. So I really appreciate your attention. I think that's about it. If anyone's got any questions, then I guess I'll take them now.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I mean, it's kind of crazy to be seeing a presentation like this. And I mean, besides that, listening to you speak about something that it's quite kind of like traditional, and just seeing how you are opening up to a less traditional way. All right, so
Yeah.
Nico and Nemo are here now, and they're our guests for asking questions. So I'll I'll open the mic for Nico and Nemo. Welcome, guys. Um,
Hello.
Hey.
All right. So mine is not really a question, but more of a comment because some aspect of our experience and our journey with VR is similar. And the way I've sort of framed it, which again, very similar to what you've done in your presentation was great, by the way. But I've thought of it in the terms of if you streamline your workflow and your process, not only for your design team, like your core team, but also for the stakeholders with digital iteration and then analog validation. And so I'd like you to maybe comment on that and expand if you could.
Yeah, I mean, so if I understood correctly, you're saying that we do this development in digital, but then mill out the clay for validation, and I mean,
Right.
that's typically how we work. Is certainly for a motorcycle to be able to mill that out. Like we can get a basic idea of by importing a mannequin and putting the mannequin in the riding position, and we can see whether there's a sharp edge on a panel gap. Or sorry, two panels joining might create a sharp edge for the knee, and we're always going to have to mill that out and sit on it and really feel whether it is okay. I mean, before we go into industrialization, there has to be that kind of analog validation. I don't know really for the automotive industry. I'm not really so used to or versed in what happens in the automotive industry, but I'm sure it's quite similar. They want to kind of feel that presence. But I would think for me, it's really important for my industry because there is such a kind of an interaction between the human and the machine. Whereas for me, a vehicle is kind of more, it's more like it's just an object, and
Right.
and I think if you've got like a Vario XR3 or something, which would be amazing. I've never tried one, but Vario, if you're
Yeah.
listening, I would love to try one. Whether the actual what you're seeing is beyond optical resolution, so you can trick yourself into believing that it's real, then yeah, I don't know whether maybe a few more years down the road, we don't even need the analog validation. I mean, does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, so the analog validation comes into play. So I'm in automotive primarily, but I'm also in greater product design. I've done various different types of products, everything from um, like simple household products all the way up to automotive, and everything in between. And basically, one thing that I feel that VR is vitally missing, but I know it's coming in the pipeline, is that tangible feel. So, for instance, let's use motorcycle. I've done a motorcycle as well, just one, so not as much experience, but this is something that you could probably relate to. When you test in VR, and you have such tight ergonomic constraints, the one thing you can't test is like when you grab the handlebars, if there's a hot spot on your palm, or being able to actuate some of those mechanical details that are so vital that you need the analog presence after you've already made a ton of design decisions in the digital space. And so that's why I say analog validation. But if you had a tool that could simulate that, what do you think that could do for the process?
I mean, yeah. So, I mean, if you had a tool that could simulate that, yeah. I mean, now we're getting into Ready Player Two territory, maybe even. So, I don't know if anyone's
Right.
read that book, but like, basically, it's not just watching or seeing things. It's you could, with this, it's like a neural link, so you can actually experience and feel. So maybe there is a future whereby you can actually have your touch senses stimulated. I don't know. This is science. That's the science fiction. But I think for now, yeah, being able to validate in analog is really important because yeah, it's all about figuring stuff out before you tool up and make stuff. So like I don't know what technology is going to be available soon, but if there was some way of simulating, of course, that would be worth trying.
Sure.
Yeah.
A quick example of how we've done that in my experience is we did an interior, for instance, and we mocked
Mhm.
up a buck that was extremely rudimentary, just a bunch of plywood and some buttons where the buttons are supposed to go, and the steering wheel that goes, an adjustable seat, and then put them in the VR with the headset, and everything was tangible and analog in actual reality, and then
Yes.
in VR it was the simulated UX UI, it was a simulated environment to where you're able to make a ton of decisions as well as get buyout on certain features from stakeholders at very, very early processes. Have you done anything like that in the motorcycle world, like create sort of a ergonomic buck that,
Yeah, it's
basically
been
looks
done.
like a
It's been
sawhorse?
done. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's been done for sure. And yeah, it's useful. I mean, any information you can glean is useful. But I would say typically, there's a lot of benchmarking existing vehicles. So
Right.
if you say, look, here, so I have a Honda VFR 800, and to me this is just like the perfect motorcycle ergonomics. And I would just so we could scan, we can just scan that and bring that in and know that we can simulate that or copy that. Say, okay, that's perfect. We haven't done that, but just for an example, there's an awful lot of benchmarking that goes on. I think what is really, really necessary is really the understanding of the finer details, like how the angle of the fuel tank is and how that curvature plays with you. Definitely, you can get some sense of it by making an ergonomics buck, but that's very early in that's you'll make those kind of ergonomics decisions really early down about like what the bike is supposed to be, what's the benchmarked ergonomics. And yeah, but it's that really refined stuff of did I smack, I maybe wouldn't have known I'll smack my elbow on the inside of the tank or something when I turn it, or I don't know,
Right,
something like that. Which even if you had an ergonomics buck, it wouldn't tell you those things. And so, for instance, like with your example about the interior, you can move your arm and touch buttons and stuff, and you don't necessarily have to touch a button to check that it's within reach. Like it's a kind of a nice to have that feedback. But yeah, I mean, I think there will be this. Certainly for the time being, there's always going to be this analog validation. But it's great to do that because that's where we do all the really beautiful surface refinement anyway. So we can only really take it so far in Gravity Sketch. I mean, I get better and better. I can sense that I'm getting better and better at it as time goes on. But people will always say there's no substitute for clay, and to a certain degree, I can empathize with that and say, or agree with that and just say, yeah, that like last 1 millimeter, 2 millimeter of surface refinement and validation is definitely worth doing as a full size clay model.
I've talked enough. I'll give Nico a chance.
Danielle, are you trying to say something really quick?
Yeah, I was gonna say that I want to make sure that we leave some time for the audience. So Nico, if you have a question, feel free to do so, and then we'll read some of the ones from the audience.
Yeah, basically my question really quick, just piggybacks off of the thing you were just saying about the last 1 to 2 millimeters for refinement. Do you find when you, like, if you take a model from VR and kind of get it to a pretty finished surfacing versus clay, do you find that you can get pretty close with the data output from Gravity Sketch to something that is visually really nice compared to like that last 1 to 2 millimeters that you might be working in clay? Can you get really, really close with the output and or within VR what you visualize? Is it pretty spot on to the final?
It's astonishingly close. For anybody who's seen data on a flat monitor and milled it out and felt that gap in their understanding about what they thought it was going to look like and what it actually looks like, in gravity, to go from Gravity Sketch into a milled model. I mean, when you see it being milled, and it's so familiar, it just looks exactly like the model you've been looking at for the last couple of weeks or however long you've been working on it. It's really, I mean, just because you've got that same human perspective in one-to-one, it's really exactly the same. It just feels like the same. The only every time we do it, we're learning a little bit more. Like for example, now, so we just presented a show bike, a Brixton Store 500 at the EICMA motorcycle show. It was done all in VR, and then we milled out the clay model. But what we'd messed up, or what we hadn't quite gotten right, was the top of the fuel tank, because our eye point wasn't controlled enough. So my eyes is 1.70 meters off the floor, say, and so I wasn't always looking at that model with my eyes exactly at the right place. Maybe I was looking at it at 1.50 meters, for example. And I was looking and thinking, okay, yeah, this was good. But actually, when you put your eyes at the right place, then it looks a bit different. The top of the tank looked a little bit low and such like. So now we learn from that, and now we know, okay, we need to make a couple of lines that we can, when I line up those two lines with the horizon at 1.70 meters off the floor, that actually my eye point is correct, and now I'm perceiving the model correctly. And then that's, so everything's learning, but really when we mill it out, it's fantastic. And so, yeah, for that particular model, we did do some I would say some 10-15 millimeter moves of the clay model. But typically, I would say it has the potential to cut down on those dramatically.
So would you say like the need for refinement, you can lower the need for refinement, or the time that you need for refinement, you can get so close that at a point you're saving quite a bit of time?
Yeah. I mean, it saves a ton of time. I mean, really, it's time saving, cost saving, everything. And there's probably a lot of guys out there who try to not do the clay modeling process. And normally, you can walk around. I can walk around a motorcycle show, and I can see which models have been done with the clay process, and which ones have just been done in a flat monitor process, because you can just tell from the surfacing. And so, but now with Gravity Sketch, you can actually you can just
can you tell which ones? Can you tell which ones have been done with the Gravity Sketch process?
No, because as far as I know, there is only two. There's the Malaguti XTM, which was just launched at the EICMA, and there was the Brixton Store. I'd love to know which other ones have been done in Gravity Sketch, but I think you won't be able to tell, because the surfacing's so sophisticated, and actually, I think we're at the start of a creative explosion that's going to happen, because Gravity Sketch enables such creative leaps to be made, or you can try without penalty, that actually people are going to try stuff, and and then they'll knock it back to the 50% feasibility for manufacturing or whatever. So we're going to see even more interesting things coming, I think, in the future.
Right. So I'll read some of the questions from the audience. So Jorge Telles says, what was the hardest part of the transition from clay to VR? What are the challenges, or what is missing?
What was the hardest part? I don't know what the hardest part was. Having to being at home every day with my wife. I joke, of course. This has been amazing, actually, for us as well, to be together all the time. We really had to learn how to communicate, which it's been fantastic. The hardest part, it hasn't really been a hard thing. I guess giving up clay, which is, I loved that process, but it was always a means to an end. I'm a design sculptor. What it was, just clay was the best means we had of sculpting design, and now I've been given this kind of this new tool, and so so I don't really think I've missed anything. And sorry, what was the second part of your question?
What are the challenges, or what is missing in the VR process?
What's missing? Yeah, I don't know what's missing. I don't really know what's missing, to be quite honest with you. Like I look forward to the possibilities. Like, for example, ability to do like CFD, computational fluid dynamics, I think. So like aerodynamics. Like, so for example, if you could bring some of those things in, like, so when you're working on a surface, you can already see how that affects the dynamic, the aerodynamics, for example. That would be incredible. So I don't think it was missing. I think now just I see that there is huge possibilities that we never even dreamed of that were possible before, but invariably are going to become possible going forwards. And so I'm not missing anything. I'm only feel treated like I feel like a kid in a candy store, really, because everything's so brilliant.
Nice. What's your pipeline beyond Gravity Sketch? For example, which packages are you using to combine the output from Gravity Sketch with scan data and precision engineering geometry?
So beyond Gravity Sketch is if we're going to a clay model, then we're doing that refinement again, and we scan that. But through whichever means, whenever we get to the point where we say this is our final design, so whether it's an output just from Gravity Sketch or a scanned clay model, that will then go into Alias. So we're still using Alias to do that refinement of surfaces. We can use, actually, we've had instances where we use the Alias surface diagnostic tools. Not me personally, but I have a colleague who uses Alias Sub D very proficiently, and so he can use those surface diagnostic tools to actually refine my Sub D model even better in Alias. We typically go to an Alias NURBS process, and then I actually get rather than me trying to look at it on the screen, I don't have an Alias license, for example, so it's difficult for me to see. He will send me an OBJ, a high fidelity OBJ, and I can bring that into Gravity Sketch, and then he can be in Gravity Sketch as well. So my Alias guy is in Belgrade, and so he could come in and we could be together looking at the highlights together, and we can talk about, you see this highlight here, it's kind of dropping, this should be more like this shape. And so he can get a real understanding of back and forth with me. So, and then engineering wise, I guess I don't have enough experience of it yet. I would say, like, I'm not really. I think when it gets kicked downstream, we haven't really been through a full A-class process where it's been so much back and forth. But these VR tools do enable that communication very well.
One challenge I've faced is presenting a VR concept to a live audience. It's not the same experience for the audience as it would be in a clay model in the room. Where do you see that going to bridge virtual to reality presentations?
So is that? I know someone's written the question, so maybe we won't be able to refine it. But within Gravity Sketch, presenting in Gravity Sketch is really powerful, and I think I guess maybe this does hark back to one problem, actually, is getting like high level stakeholders who they know how to walk into a room and look at a clay model. It's simple, but taking them out of that kind of comfort zone into VR and having to look at a clay model, a VR model, and navigate around it is a little bit of a barrier, to be honest. And I wonder sometimes, if that's part of the reason why they're not being adopted, just because they don't have the level of comfort, and they don't want to look silly in front of their subordinate, really. But I mean, personally, I've found it only amazing to be able to present, because it means we've got clients all around the world, and we can all come together around the model and regularly, and so you can have checks like every week, for example, whereas typically if your client was a long way away, you might not be able to get a check in with them until 6 weeks or 8 weeks later, and then you're going to learn, we should have done this differently, we should have done that differently. So the information flow that happens in these checks is very important for to get to the the final solution more efficiently. So hopefully that answers your question.
Nemo, do you have one last question before we jump out?
Yeah. So if you look, I'm going to speak in automotive terms just because I'm a bit more familiar, but you'll understand the phenomenon that I'm explaining is if you look at industrial design and in automotive design, typically as tools got better and as techniques got better in design, the design language evolved. You go into the 60s, you had these beautiful sculptural cars. You go in the 70s, you started to see the wedge cars. In the 80s, everything was boxy. Coming into the 90s, organic design, just a perfect example there. What type of design do you see being unlocked through tools like Gravity Sketch? I have very strong opinions on this, but being that you're from a motorcycle background, I think you would have a unique insight that I'd love to hear.
I honestly don't know. I have to say I don't feel qualified to answer that question. Typically, just basically because I have a background in design, but I'm a design sculptor now, and so the reason why I moved to design sculpting is because I recognize that whilst I could manifest designs beautifully, other people had way better ideas than me for form. So I don't know. I think that's a design kind of question, and I'm not really qualified to answer it, I'm afraid. But I think people will experiment more, and we're at this point with AI and Mid-Journey and all that stuff where people are, the stuff I see coming out of Mid-Journey with the sketches that are going in, and the permutations of those sketches are just phenomenal. And I'm looking at these and I'm like, yep, they all work. Yep, they all work. And some of the sketches I see from designers, you're like, that doesn't really work in 3D. I'm going to have to kind of figure that out. But actually, so yeah, there's some really high quality output from these AI systems, and I think just that's gonna have a massive impact on the kind of design thinking, and then hopefully I still have a career. Hopefully it doesn't manifest itself as 3D modeling too much. I typically don't worry about these AI tools replacing what we do, but just really turbocharging them, and so making it faster, easier, and more ubiquitous.
All right. I mean,
Awesome.
We've run out of time, but I do want to ask this last question because I think it's important for people to have this conversation and just give each other tips. So this is from Michele. Ciao, guys. I have a simple question. Maybe I already answered. The hardest thing I find in VR is being able to stand long sessions. Do you have any tips, suggestions, timing suggestions, etc.? Plus, do you feel your eyesight suffers after the session?
I haven't struggled with it, honestly. And I've, the Quest 2 with an Elite head strap is so comfortable. Like, so if you go from a Quest 2 with the elastic head strap and then put the Elite head strap on, it is night and day in terms of comfort. And actually, honestly, so I now have the Quest Pro, and yes, although the resolution's marginally better, I don't think it's 1,800 euros better, and I find it significantly more uncomfortable because it's just resting kind of here on my forehead. Yeah, I haven't had any problems with discomfort at all. No vertigo. Typically, I wear glasses in the real world, but I don't have to wear glasses in Gravity Sketch. It's all fine. Yeah, honestly, time just disappears when I'm in here, and I can be in for many hours very comfortably. And sometimes I really need to remind myself of that because if I'm teaching students and we're doing 6. I'm saying, hey guys, we're going to do 6 hours today. I need to kind of, because I'm so comfortable, I need to remember that maybe not everybody is that comfortable, and so kind of to try and take regular breaks. But I hope, I hope everyone can find kind of a comfortable way of using it. I've never experienced any problems. I've read all the tips, like get a bottle with a straw so you can take regular drinks and that kind of a thing. I think it's as comfortable as being in the real world.